My name is Viviane Sassen. I'm Dutch. I live and work in Amsterdam. I'm a photographer, artist. I do both fashion photography and I also work as an artist. When I was young, I sometimes would go through all these magazines of my aunt and I looked at all these amazing fashion images and I thought my dream was to become a fashion designer. Afterwards, I did a master's in fine arts. So at the end of my studies, I had done fashion, photography and art, and I'm still using all three of those simultaneously. So both the art and the fashion. Thinking about photography, it's always struck me how photographs for me have been portals to kind of parallel universes. Now, especially when I was young, I would look at pictures in magazines or books or even old family pictures and be transported in these different worlds that would no longer exist, or would make me dream about worlds that I didn't know, but I was very curious to get to know. So in that sense, I think photographs have always been portals for me. And then also at the same time, they're the exact opposite. They're like mirrors, and they are reflecting back what is already inside of you. So as a viewer, if you look at pictures, you always have your own references, your own upbringing, your own mental state. This is all medium format on the Mamiya 7. So normally I would do like three rolls of film. Even kijken. In the end, I think it's this one that I chose. Let me see. Yeah, this one. From the age of 2 till 5, more or less, I lived in Kenya with my parents. My father was working there as a doctor in a local hospital in a very tiny village. Those years were super formative. I think your very first childhood memories somehow stay with you because it's almost like how you were programmed. You know, it's in my spine or in my blueprint. So these years in Africa still resonate with me and are very visible in my work. And I think especially the light, because Kenya is, we live basically almost on the equator, and the light has just a very specific quality. It's so crispy and bright, and especially at midday, the sun is exactly above you. And you hardly have any shadows anymore. But also the bright colors, there's something very graphic. And when I came back in my village in 2004 and saw the people that I knew from back then, and I started to having all these very vivid dreams and suddenly a lot of ideas for pictures, and somehow this was a very important moment in my practice as a photographer, because I always felt when I was young that I didn't see the Africa represented in media like how I remembered it from when I was a child. So suddenly when I came back there and was back in the village, it suddenly clicked, why is everybody always only showing it in a documentary way? And I started staging my pictures and kind of allowing this surrealness to come in, which for me made this connection between my childhood and the Africa that I knew from back then with the Africa that or Kenya, how it had become in the early 2000s. And that's when I made the series Flamboya and Parasomnia. I think the dream world has always been a very important source of inspiration for me. For a very long time when I was younger, I always felt that my life during the daytime was equally important to my life at night and in my dreams. I think for me it was kind of 50-50. I don't know, I always have pretty crazy dreams and very visual dreams. So sometimes I would wake up with an idea for a picture in my head from one of my dreams, and I would scribble, do a little drawing in my sketchbook. But I think just in general, the subconscious is very important for, at least for artists like me. The body has always been quite central in my work, and I think one of the reasons is that when we lived in Kenya, we lived next door to the crippled home where children with polio lived, and I was often playing with them outside. They were my friends, but they also had these severe body deformations. But if you're 4 years old, you don't really realize that this is such a serious disease. And I also clearly remember when I was a teenager that I would become very interested in my own body, in the sense that I would go and stand in front of the mirror and making like really kind of weird shapes with my body. And if I would look in like one direction or with one eye, it would look, my body would become kind of a sculpture. And I could only see it with my own eye in the mirror, and at that point I didn't take any pictures. But when I was in art school, suddenly I thought, I can do more pictures like that. Later on, when I started modeling and started to be involved in fashion, especially with the modeling, I think for a while I was kind of struggling with the fact that I was always working with these male photographers, and I was still very young, but they wanted something sexual. They would say things like, yeah, make love to the camera, or pretend I'm your boyfriend, or all these kind of things. And I think taking up that camera and starting to make self-portraits was also a way for me to liberate myself from that male gaze and to regain the power over my own body. So fashion was always a big inspiration, not only because I loved looking at fashion images, but also it was a way for me to get my work out in the world. I think for my artistic work, something needs to trigger my imagination. Yeah, most of the time it's often travel, for instance. reading, but it's much more vague. And then it's much more in the unconscious. And then somehow I have to drag it out of the unconscious to the subconscious to the conscious. And but I think what is important for me is not to plan too much, and to be able to kind of build and kind of mold and draw inspiration from different parts. And it's really like playing, basically. So I like to keep it very simple. What I really enjoy the most, I think, is to just be alone, have some music, and just lose myself completely in working.
Beautiful place. Beautiful place.
Well, at some point, I realized that the shadow was an element in my pictures that kept on reappearing. And of course, every photographer is dealing with shadows, because every photographer is dealing with light. But more and more it occurred to me that I was really drawn to the shadow, and the shadow as an entity in itself, almost like a character in my pictures. So I decided to investigate the shadow in my work. And first it became very obvious, because it became very literal. Suddenly, if something which is in your subconscious becomes conscious, then you start seeing shadows everywhere. And so then I started reading a lot about the shadow, and did a lot of research about the shadow in art history, but also in psychology. I started reading about black holes, astronomy, etc. But then I also realized that if I really wanted to investigate the shadows, I had to investigate my own personal shadows and go within. I realized that these shadows represented death, the idea of death. And for a very long time, when I was younger, I had this extreme fear of death. When I was 22, my father passed away, and he ended his own life. But I think his death, and also the fact that he was a doctor and always worked in this realm between life and death and sickness, and was something that that kind of came back to me many years later when I was investigating these shadows. And I also thought the shadow is not only it should not only be darkness, you know, there's also beauty in shadow, and there's also even a colored shadows. So this was more of a philosophical or even spiritual ending of that whole process of finding my own shadow. Phosphor is a word that has been with me for a very long time. It kind of refers to photography, but also phosphor in itself is like this element which radiates light from itself, which I like. I've never done a retrospective before, so this show at the MAP is really kind of huge for me. So for the show, I selected still like a few hundred images that will be shown in a special room dedicated to all the fashion work. I like to show my fashion work in these kind of immersive installations, because it somehow feels weird for me, as also being an artist, to get these fashion images out of their context and put them on the wall as if they were art. There's really a distinction between work that I make for myself or as my art and the work that I do as a fashion photographer. And somehow this is how I balance the two. But of course, there's a fine line, you know, because I mean, also a lot of my art pictures, a lot of people that think that they are fashion pictures, which is sometimes complicated, but it is what it is. For me, it's kind of yin-yang situation that they keep each other in balance.